the cloud. Hi, everybody. Today is March 16th, and this is the meeting for the K8s Infra group. Please be kind to each other. This is being recorded. Hey, Ben, you ended up joining. Oh, both Bens are here, so good. Okay, so let's get started with our usual stuff. But before that, Ariel, have you introduced yourself to the team here before? I recognize everybody else.
No, I think I know most of the folks, but my name is Ariel. I'm a CNCF ambassador, and I'm currently working with the CNCF on strategic initiatives with Hippie.
Nice. Welcome to this group.
Thank you.
Billing review. So let me make you co-host, Eddie. Make co-host. Okay, please grab share screen.
One of these windows. How's that?
I can see. Oh yeah, I can see the full now.
Cool. So that spend looks like what we would expect. Nothing jumps out as having changed. There was the increase from, what was this Arnaud is Arnaud on the call yet? No, Cloud CDN. Arnaud is playing with the Cloud CDN, so that's been up and down a bit.
Okay.
But otherwise, this looks normal. That number looks right. Cloud build, service and project. Yeah, CDN's up a tiny bit. Nothing else jumps out to me.
Okay.
And this all looks as expected.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? So of the cloud storage, Eddie, do we have a breakdown of that? Like how much is the container image storage versus bandwidth and transit costs and that kind of thing?
I have some data that I can send you as well, that we broke when we broke it down by provider. So that could probably help answer your question a bit.
Okay. I mean, I did see some data in Ben's doc as well about the multi-cloud provider registry. I was just wondering whether this particular report allowed you to.
This report will let you see the quickest thing at the beginning is just there's a project that's only image hosting. So that gives you a very quick idea like how much is the image hosting, but then drilling down into like where is the image hosting costs go to. I think the
right, because I remember
from some log analysis, and that isn't public. Okay,
gotcha. Because yeah, I remember seeing in your doc, Ben, that there was a significant chunk of those costs were transit costs, right? Getting from GCR into AWS customers pulling from Google over into AWS regions, and there was a significant cost associated with that.
We're inferring that based on like the raw, like just having the images stored should be negligible compared to the rest of the costs, like the actual downloads. And we can look at the percentage of requests coming. I actually don't have original access to that log data either. that that those numbers actually come from previous iterations of this meeting.
Okay, okay, cool.
So we are sensitive to publishing the provider specific data in a public meeting. So, but Rian and Caleb and Hippie, they worked on some digesting some log information, and then we have that, which Eddie can send to you, Jay. Okay.
Cool. Thanks.
Sounds good. Okay. I don't know what action items we picked last time. I don't see any here. So let's go to the open discussion. Jay, do you want to get us started?
Sure. So just to introduce myself to those who don't know me. Hi, I'm Jay. I work at the Kubernetes team at AWS. And I just want to back what Eddie has stated previously up, that AWS is 100% committed to sharing the costs of Kubernetes infrastructure, and well, CNCF in general, but in particular, the Kubernetes costs. We recognize that it's a huge amount of money that's going to, in particular, serving container images for AWS customers. So we want to do everything that we can to help alleviate those costs. So I've brought in a solutions architect to help with a couple technical projects at the CNCF level. His name is Ted Zaworski. I'll be working with Ted over the coming weeks and months to get you whatever you need. You know, whether it's account resources, like SA type resources, or you know, scripts or CloudFormation, whatever it is, we'll get you what you need. Yeah, the doc that Ben, that you put together with the multi-cloud provider registry and all that, I see some great ideas in there. I'm curious sort of where you all are with like an implementation. I saw something from Caleb about like different alternatives in like a documentation PR to the registry or to the repository there. But how can we help? How can we sort of accelerate the effort and get things going?
Yeah, so maybe that's the segue to me giving you know, what was happening for the last couple of weeks. The first one that we did was we created a registry-sandbox.k8s.io. So this was an endpoint which was just forwarding all calls to the previous the repository that's currently the production one, k8s.gcr.io. And we started by trying things by hand, doing Docker pulls and running some local stuff to get things from that repository, and that worked out fine. So we promoted that to registry.k8s.io now, and you know, we did the same testing again by hand, and things were working. So we took one of the pre-submit tests, which is running in Kubernetes. That's the one with the long name that ends with Ubuntu-containerd. So we picked that one, and we added some environment variables so that the kubeup scripts turns around and uses registry.k8s.io, and that worked fine. It's been running, it's been on since last Friday with no issues showing up. So it is actually live right now on the KK repository. So the second one that we did this morning, what we turned on was there is a periodic job that runs all the time. We enabled the same environment variables, making it point to the registry.k8s.io. So essentially, at this point, we have one pre-submit and one periodic job. hammering the registry. And the traffic is not that much yet. But now we have to figure out like what are the other classes of tests that are there, because this first batch was essentially kubeb scripts. Then we have Kubedium based CI jobs. We have kind based CI jobs. So we should probably start looking at those to see if we can point those jobs to this new endpoint. That's where we are at this point. Any questions, anyone? Ben?
I just might add a little bit more. So we kind of have the multiple tracks as well. On the actually hosting side, we kind of focus on trying to figure out like what will be provided so that we can set that up. And I think we've had kind of like different tracks going. We've also had release engineering looking a bit at the image promoter changes. And then I think a couple of us here have been primarily focused on what Dims was talking about, getting the registry domain rolled out with just the stable redirector so we can start getting client traffic shifted over. I think we're pretty close to the point where we're going to be comfortable to start asking projects to switch over that, so that domino is in place when we set up the rest. But the like actually hosting multi-cloud has not moved a lot at the moment because we've been trying to figure out how are the resources getting provided and what resources for sure before we like really roll with anything. In the meantime, I've worked a bit on the identify traffic piece and the options for that. Haven't sent any PRs yet, but I have some local benchmarking and tests and like research and whatnot. I think that part should work fine. And it looks like the just toss it at Cloud Run is working fine for where to serve the minimal redirector service. So I think next steps are we need to figure out those actual resources. Is that an ECR? Is it S3? Is it like how do we need to regionalize it in the front end or the back end? Like, yeah, are we just handing off to CloudFront, or does the redirector need to identify regions? Those pieces we need to figure out before we move much more on the code. There's not going to be a lot of code, I think. Same thing with like copying images over. It's actually going to be very little code, but we need to figure out like, are we doing are we copying to a registry endpoint? Are we copying to a bucket? And
where are you?
We need to finish rolling out the registry.
Where are you on that particular decision? As far as like, I saw a comment from Jesse Butler about maybe using like ECR public to sort of like mirror both the registry as well as the bits themselves. And there was a comment about maybe using CloudFront instead of just raw S3. So
Caleb did a research track here and found that if we want to use like say ECR public, we have to hand off the whole registry API. There isn't a great way to just pass along the bits. So I still lean in the direction of doing the bucket just because it's easier for me to convince every stakeholder that like this is fine. It's just the blobs. We can expand. The other thing I like about that is it's very easy to expand to like as many providers as we want. The main problem is going to be concerns around like reliability or identifying traffic. It's a lot easier to convince people of like the security properties of having more registries if they're not actually registries and they're just hosting the blobs, and it solves our cost issue. But I wanted to leave the other routes open because I think there's a little bit of like beggars can't be choosers here. We need resources, and someone says we're providing ECR, that's it. Then I think I can try to convince folks to like this will be fine. We'll get it locked down, and maybe we won't repeat this pattern for every provider. But like we need to cut costs.
The ECR thing, the ECR comment from Jesse was definitely not like we're only going to support ECR or anything like that. It was just like here's a potential solution.
Oh yeah,
but like I mentioned earlier, we'll do whatever needs to be done.
Okay.
If S3 is the simplest, most direct way to get to sharing the costs of these container image downloads, let's do that. Let's do it. Like
I think some kind of just blob store with paying attention to regionalizing is the most straightforward route. That said, Caleb did also look a bit at like, how would we convince people that like this is locked down enough? Because again, we're not saying that like the registry itself is insecure or something. It's more like our own trust issues around handling those credentials and that sort of thing. There's been some incidents in the past, and there's from some certain folks, there's a somewhat understandable high level of paranoia around hosting things like kube proxy that run privileged everywhere. So
are you talking about the credentials that image promoter would need in order to push to an
well,
an object
yes,
with
and in the
S3
past,
bucket?
it's even potentially been humans and whatnot. So we've moved towards the promoter. We've moved towards having there's some infrastructure somewhere that uses PubSub to monitor like everything that happens in the registry, and we have things like continually checking it. So there's a lot of like extra things beyond GCR itself where we're trying to make sure like we're keeping this source of truth very locked down and like transparent. So there's some concern that like if we start adding more registries, how do we replicate that out everywhere, and how do we convince folks like the release team or like Tim that this is actually secure? The S3 thing also has the nice property that registry implementations tend to vary a little bit in exactly how they work and behave. Whereas like the S3 API is really well standardized. So if we can get this route working, then we can potentially spin this up on more providers very easily. So that's my suggestion. But also when it comes down to things like, should we have CloudFront in front or whatnot, that's where I'm like, hey, that sounds like a topic for some Amazon architects. I'm definitely not one. I can't tell you for sure.
Exactly. And we'll bring Ted in to give his advice as to, what's the most cost-effective solution for that. It may be CloudFront fronting, some other stuff, or it just may be S3 objects. It depends, I think, on a number of attributes of these container images, size and frequency that they are pulled, and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I think we're also in a little bit of a unique position with this project where we have some fun things to share here, where because we have this promoter process and because these images are only public, we can have this like public read only, super simple open source little thing serving as much of the traffic as possible. I think our other end goal here is just, besides getting costs cut now, getting something in place where we have control to rethink this all in the future, serve it however we want. So I've been recently a little bit more focused on that. Arnaud has done some great work there, and I think we're pretty much at the point where we can roll that out. But there's definitely some questions around exactly how we architect the AWS side, and I would super welcome help there.
Absolutely.
I think Arnaud also has thoughts on that. I would love to help and keep in touch, but I would want Arnaud involved for sure.
I saw that there was a GitHub project that you're using to sort of track the OCI registry thing.
I think there's a project for the SIG, and then we have a GitHub repo that has just like the redirector, and we have a couple issues there that are specific to it. But they are pretty focused on just like the redirect stuff. We probably need, we probably should file something either there or in the main K8s.io repo that's sort of the SIG's main tracker for like, how do we handle the rest?
AWS specific bits. Yeah, like if we had a GitHub issue that was specific to like the AWS setup bits that we want to explore, then we can have, folks like Ted take a look at those issues.
I think it would be fine in either of those places. Do you have a preference, Tims?
Yeah, Kubernetes /K8s.io. Let's do it there.
Got it.
Yeah, and then we can link from cross-link from wherever else we come.
I also say if we stand up any additional infrastructure, like the actual hosting that isn't just the redirector, like that, those things are probably going to live in that repo. That's where we have like all of our Terraform and Bash and whatnot that actually stands up infra.
Yeah.
We just pulled out the code specific to this project that isn't infra configs into a different repo.
Yeah. So the way I want to somehow drive this is like, what are we doing for the next 2 weeks, right? So on the testing side, I know that we will work on the Kubadium, Kinder, and Kind. So those are the 3 different sets of things that we have in the CI job. So a bunch of us can work on that. On the AWS side, what should we do, Jay? Given what you've heard so far, what can we do in the next couple of weeks so we know that we are making progress?
Specifically on the OCI, like the container image stuff.
Yeah, container image. Let's just say we have a redirector which redirects to existing thing.
Do we have?
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a little delay. Probably because I'm on VPN, so it's going to the West Coast. Who knows? But is there a sort of an agreed upon naming scheme that for these container images copies, like the copies of the container images, so that like this top level routing server can say, okay, I'm coming from US East 1 in an AWS AS, and this like kube proxy image is actually stored at this particular S3 objects location.
The objects should all be identified by their hash, and there's like a like the registry API itself has a standard for the paths. I think the sanest thing for us to do is to just kind of like mimic statically those paths.
Okay.
I believe that's more or less what the like GCS back into GCR is doing today. So that would also allow us to even potentially make the upload implementation as simple as like sync the buckets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we always use immutable tag. Like we never re-push a tag for an image, right?
Yeah,
that's true, but also we would only be redirecting the blob requests, and those are always by an immutable reference.
Okay.
Like the mutable part of the API we'll just continue serving by redirect to the exist registry. So then we don't have to implement that, and we have the same properties as today.
Okay, so the client address would come in, get identified to whatever AWS region the source IP was coming from. We tack on whatever it was, US East 1.s3.
Yep.
The canonical, according to like Docker registry, canonical image URI, I guess, to that, and then that would be the object identifier.
Yeah, so we're basically just substituting the host. And I think the open question we have on the implement the registry side is just, should the registry be trying to identify AWS regions, which looks doable with IP addresses, or just identify this as an AWS client and hand off to like an Amazon global endpoint like CloudFront or something? Or should we have like a bucket per region and do it in the front end? Because I believe we could, from the published IP range data, detect the region in the redirect service and map to, okay, we have like a S3 bucket or something in each region. So that we can,
or you can just detect down. It's coming from AWS and then redirect it to something housed at AWS that would have more fine-grained information about regional location.
Right. That's the part that I'm not sure which of those is.
Let's ask Ted.
The best answer. Okay.
Yeah. Let's ask Ted for that kind of thing.
Because I assume that like same thing on the AWS side, we're going to want to serve from local copies. There's something like that happening on the Google Cloud side today, which helps some, but
Right.
obviously not for
Well,
traffic
for
that's in
the
another
stuff
cloud.
that's in Google Cloud, right? Yeah.
It still at least gets us something like not doing transcontinental cross cloud.
Right. Okay, well, I'll take that as an action item to chat with Ted. Definitely get Ted. I just got him joined into the CNCF Slack community, so I'll have him join the Kubernetes Slack K8s Infra channel, and I'll take it as an action item to discuss with him what's the best approach there, either embedding that information into the top level router or sort of just redirecting to something that is on the AWS side that can make a determination as to best location for source IPs.
And if you want to like model something, like I pasted two log files, which has images that we use for the pre-submit job. So this is basically what we should be able to serve from your endpoint, essentially. Anything that says registry.k8s.io, you should be replaced with your own thing.
I think
Okay, gotcha.
once we come to a decision on that piece of the architecture, then we can have folks move forward on, okay, getting things copied into the storage and actually doing the redirect at the level of intelligence that it needs.
Right. So at this point, by hook or crook, you set up whatever you want to set up, which will serve these images essentially, and then we can, start tweaking. Then talking about how do we copy things from GCS buckets into whichever you choose on the AWS side, right?
Yeah.
Well, does the image promoter have sort of knowledge of how to push to an S3 bucket versus a cloud storage?
It doesn't today. Right now, it's copying between GCR buckets, but there's like a particular step where it's like take this image and move it over, and there's already, I believe, a little bit of magic for cosign signatures.
Okay.
So we can add some code there that either
I'm happy to contribute that.
inspects the manifest and copies over the referenced objects, or we can like do a separate bulk sync step, or like that. We have a number of options. I think I was leaning towards is when we promote an image to GCR, before we do that, inspect the manifest, copy the objects into S3 where they belong. Once that succeeds, promote the image. That way we don't have any consistency issues. And then have just a small script for one-time backfill that's just run a gsctil rsync or equivalent tool to just bulk copy everything in once. But we haven't wanted to actually ship that yet because we hadn't for sure settled on we will use S3 or equivalent.
Yeah, there's an S3 sync tool that's very similar to rsync that just uses S3 buckets.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the GCS tools because I have this, but the same idea. There should be like off-the-shelf tools that just bulk copy all the objects.
All right. I don't want to cut anyone off, but we got to move up. We're still like way down in the technical weeds where we always wind up for a long time. So, right, all of that is implementation details, right? Like once the registry is set up, once the redirect, once the URLs, foo.whatever.k8s.io, everything beyond that is the implementation detail that the user will never know or need to worry about, and we can change without telling them, right?
Agreed.
Right.
Yes.
But we are blocked on the technical, those few details right now.
Yeah.
Once we sort those out, we can make progress.
Ben, I think I'm trying to like provide an objective for the next 2 weeks, and the objective that I can think of is if you have an endpoint running on some AWS CloudFront or whatever that can serve these images, and the Docker pull against the endpoint that you've set up works, let's get there. Like that.
I would suggest that we don't need a whole Docker pull endpoint because some of that's going to come from the redirector anyhow. We just need some input from an expert on what's the best way to handle regionalizing this storage, or if they think it's super bad idea, we should use
Docker pull already supports the the 302 redirect mechanism.
Like, we've got extensive tests on that. That's actually how the GC. That's exactly how the other thing is how the existing registry works. It 302s to to GCS. So
Right.
we know all that. We just need to know, what do the experts recommend for how do we make sure this is regionalized and cost effective on the AWS side? Once we know if that should be done in the front or the back, then we can move to implement. On the other tasks we can talk about, we should have folks move forward more on rolling out just the simple redirect domain. So what Dims was talking about, we should get this in more classes of our CI, so we can make sure everything's good there just to be safe. And we should probably be looking at what else do we need to roll that out. So on top of my mind, I want to slip a few more things into the tool itself so that I feel we're ready to like freeze it and roll it out to production. One that comes to mind is right now at hard codes where the backend is. We maybe need to be able to shift that around in the future so we can potentially take over that domain as well for traffic that may not be moved as easily. So I want to just like look at what remaining things do we feel like be robust enough to just freeze that code in place for this is the version we're using to serve the production domain so we can start moving traffic. If folks are interested in looking at that and think about what else do we want to future proof for that before we start adding further complications like identifying IP addresses. And I want to get a tagged image published in the next 2 weeks.
Agree. So can we log some issues that Caleb can pick up?
Yes. I'll file some issues related to that. Dims, do you have issues related to the CI or should we file some more of those?
Yeah, I'll file it today. I haven't done that yet. I was distracted with looking through logs. So yeah. So Ben, you have an action item to log some issues. Some of those issues Caleb will pick up, and let's see if anybody else can work on anything else. And you are working on a couple. And by this time, 2 weeks from now, let's make sure that we have a tagged image promoted to registry.k8s.io. Okay. So let's see if we can get there by that time. So I'm trying, like, let's try to get there. Like, that's our objective. If something else comes, something always comes. And Jay and Eddie, you have enough things to try or enough information to like do.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk with Ted and get some ideas from him. So what's the most effective way to structure these regional S3?
And the other thing is, it doesn't have to be like super optimized, Jay. It could be something rough where the back we can change, right? Like
as long as it's not like a one-way door and we're shooting ourselves in the foot. But yeah,
right. We have plenty of room to change this. I just think we should talk to an expert up front so that we don't immediately like run up in a ridiculous bill once we start shipping this.
So the way I'm looking at this, Ben, is until we open up things for 125 and we get a kept through, we can't change any of the hard-coded URLs, right? In the code, we are not going to touch any of the hard-coded URLs like the pause image or whatever, right? Like we'll try not to touch the main code base. What we'll be changing is the scripts, and we'll be making things optional and driven by an environment variable or a config file or something until we get to 125.
I agree 125. I'm not sure I agree kept.
Yeah, it depends on who twists our arm and when, right? So
I think we've had to make this kind of change before, and that's fine, and it's like within this SIG, like past image domain migration as an example. But I do agree. We shouldn't do this in 124, but we should be making all the preparations on we can potentially look to moving some of the sub projects on their own timelines.
Correct.
We should be moving towards getting everything using the new registry URL. That should be the goal, right? Like we should be going out to pull request cops. We should be updating in kubeadm, right? Like again, implementation detail beyond that point, right? Like once everything is using the right domain in the new registry, everything else we can change and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So the one thing here is, Eddie, is we can't tell, like, if I go tell Kubedium folks to go change to registry.k8s.io, they're going to like protest vehemently, and rightly so, right?
Maybe. I don't know that that's the key. I mean, if we show them that this is just a stable redirector and we have that locked in place,
Yeah,
my
that's
main
the
concern
point.
is just the timing with respect to we are approaching release. I'm not trying to rock the boat late stages of the release.
Yeah, it's too late in this cycle to do this, right? Like that is part of the reason why, I'm okay with switching on by default to some of the CI jobs, like the ones that we did, last Friday and this morning. But I don't want to go around telling people like, go change all your registries right now.
But if there are any projects that are not close to releasing, the only reason that I wouldn't want to change right away is just so that we get a chance to soak it and double check. Yep. But we're not talking like, I think there'll be a very separate decision on when we cut over to actually having the more advanced hosting. But just the redirector, we should be able to get enough confidence and start moving folks to having the domain sooner rather than later. And then we have a separate discussion about when do we time the cutover to potentially breaking different behaving registry.
Right.
But
and
behind the domain.
And the thing there is, like, we do the boiling the frog analogy where we keep telling people like, hey, we are trying this, we are trying that, and people will say, hey, what are you doing? Right. So, and then they realize that, yes, we are trying to create a new one. So Lubomir got interested and Fabrizio got interested. So, they'll also start researching what kind of problems are there in their side of the neck of the woods. So they are not taken by surprise, right?
Right. But we shouldn't have the peer redirect. The only reason we'd have any is something like the infra doesn't scale up or something like that. And for that, we do want to start getting projects moved over so we can catch that.
We've talked about this a few times, right? The important thing again is getting the new domain in place, because when we look at our forecasting for our budget, we need to make change now, right? Like this has to be changed now. We're going to run out of money by the end of the year. And so the slowest part is going to be having users start updating their tools to use the new endpoints, and the project maintainers cutting a new version release that have the new endpoint in there, right? So when we've talked about this before, we need a transparent proxy to whatever is in place now, right? Just like updating the domain through our proxy. That is the most important thing, because again, we are going to run out of money by the end of the year unless we start putting all these things in place, and the longest adoption is going to be that cutover.
I think we're generally in agreement. I think the point is reasonable though, that like even with that level of stability, going and changing a bunch of manifests late in the release cycle is not great. We should target like the very beginning of 125.
Yeah, I'm not saying do it for 124, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But like we need to get it all in place so that we can start doing that as soon as we can.
So I think when we come back in 2 weeks, we can have folks already looking at, okay, what other projects in the ecosystem are pulling through this registry that are, at a reasonable point in the release cycle, or can we start talking to them about this anyhow? And that's something that we can massively shard out in this group is please go work with our sub projects to start this migration to the new endpoint.
Right.
So, and remember that specific for AWS, that data that we looked at, that is not EKS. That is customers doing their own Kubernetes using some community tool or themselves. So that's going to be the big focus for that cost saving.
Yep.
Once Kubernetes hits in the release cycle and is pointing to that reg, that is the moment when we're going to see this cost reduction hit.
Right. And that is going to be 125 release, not 124. So I guess just to repeat, until 124 final 124.0 is released, we'll be trying to change as many CI jobs as possible over a period of time. Kubedium, Kinder, and Kind, and then KubeOp. So we'll go around changing all those jobs to point to the new registry and getting a sense of how it works, right? And and then we are going to do we're going to capture some metrics too, right, Ben? You were talking about some metrics, and that's probably one of the issues that you need to file. So we'll make sure that we put up, we'll add the features for the OCI proxy as soon as possible so that we can bake it in while things are happening. And then on the parallel track is the AWS side. How do we set this up, and how do we serve these blobs for the SHAs? You'll figure out that side, and then there is going to be like, okay, when can the redirector point to your stuff? So that'll be another major milestone. I don't know when we'll be able to get there, but let's shoot for maybe a couple of months down the line. So
I think we need to be able to point people to the production domain, like basically
yeah, I agree.
now, and talk about switching out what's behind it later. The pure redirect should be pretty safe.
Is there something within our community where we can escalate up to the next level, either whether it's steering or to say that the importance of the cost savings and get in this domain? We have a super simple review of that flow to get that the updates happening as early in the process as possible with some confidence, or are we worried enough that we really must push this out to?
Yeah, I want to put some load on this one, Hippie. I want to put a load on what we have today, and I want to. So when we start making changes in KK to remove case.jcr.io and put in registry.case.io, that is the point when we'll go around to all the repositories and say, hey, Kubernetes is changing, let's change, right? Like, so, all of us, it's all hands on deck at that point, right? Like going around changing all the projects and then making, and essentially what we'll tell them is, look, 125 alpha 1 of Kubernetes has already switched to registry.case.io. So all of you should do the same, right? That is the best way to deal with the situation. They should see evidence that Kubernetes is doing, and then they will follow. Like this is the same for pause image or distroless image or any of the other things also. We lead the way, right? Like, so we start first, and then we show them that we are doing this, and we start following.
So 125 isn't going to come out till August, right? And so that leaves us, that's probably halfway through August. So that gives us 4 months. And we are definitely going to blow through all of our budget and runway.
Other thing is uptake is not very fast.
All of the modeling that we did was based off of getting this shipped in like February, right? And so we're pretty past that at this point.
Yeah.
We do have the ability to look at like distros though, like, or installer tools, and use it regardless of what the defaults are in KK.
One of the things that Eddie noticed a while back was in looking at our data on the PII side, we can actually look at the user agent. And if we can go ahead and mass PR into every tool we have, we're lacking some availability and knowing. Go ahead.
Yeah, we discussed this. The problem is the actual agent is the container runtime, which is very unlikely to be aware of the like distro above it.
Correct.
It potentially even has multiple clients in theory. Like Kubelet talks to CRI, API, containerd, and then containerd is the thing actually doing the pulling. So we'll just see like, oh, it's containerd version X, and that won't tell us anything about, okay, but who configured this?
Right.
So it's we're a bit of dialing home type things, but when we were working on API Snoop, we had to go through and update the client Go library to be able to infer. And at one point, we actually injected into the user agent the stack trace, so that we could identify what pieces of the Kubernetes code base were part of that call. It may be, I don't think it would be too inappropriate to look at updating the way in which the pull works at a container runtime interface, to not say the whole stack, but at least say, why are we here pulling this image in that user agent? It doesn't really reveal any
Well,
extra data, but would allow
I
us.
wouldn't stop you from working on that. I would just suggest to you that it's probably a waste of time. It will take so long to roll out. It will be too late to help us.
All right.
And the other thing is there is some security implications of that as well. There is an issue similar to this that was being talked about in the containerd. They were trying to figure out like how much of the traffic comes from nerdctl, for example, right? Because that's the tool. Anyway, that's digressing on a different direction. So let's not worry about that right now. Yeah. So that's a good idea. I like it. It's just that if it's kubectl, which we have control over, then we know we can do some stuff. But if there is other community tools, then it becomes harder to like, they have, they can push back against us, right? So
I think Eddie's point is really important and worth like potentially reconsidering that. I mean, we are not actually in code freeze yet, and August is really late. My only suggestion would be that we do have the potential to, if we have confidence that it's not just people using Kubetum and Kubernetes defaults, then we can go around to like K8s and Kubespray and everything and say, hey, can you please like just override this, use the registry K8s.io in your next release, independent of the Kubernetes release timeline, and then hope those tools roll out. And also projects that aren't part of the org, we can ask.
Yeah, we can go around creating issues in the different places for sure at this point.
Because I do think we want as much of this to roll out like in the next month or so as possible. It might be worth having. I think we should come back in a few weeks and see where we feel on this once we've thrown some more load at it. I think we should be fine. I don't see any reason that Cloud Run shouldn't be able to scale up and handle this. And it is just like you can read the code in a few minutes. It's not doing much.
It is not much. Agreed. Okay. Arno, you're back. Hello. Did you have anything? So we were trying to figure out like what comes first, what comes next, what's parallelizable, and who's who has the action items, and what can we do in the next 2 weeks? Does that sound like a plan to you, Arno?
There's a lot of things to do in 2 weeks because
yes,
when I basically everything involved, there's a lot of things to do in 2 weeks, and I'm not sure we can do all of this because.
So let me run it by you one more time, Arno. I don't know if you caught it last time. So
I just want to add a few things. Basically, COPS folks, I talked to COPS folks last week. They agreed to do that for the 124 release. Cluster APIs is okay to do that for 125. And SIG scalability is okay to do that for 125. So I just need to ping some SIG leads about this. So the target is basically introduce that change for 125 and see what's happening.
Correct. So did you already catch what I was saying about the next 2 weeks, or no? Or should I repeat that?
No, I didn't catch anything.
You didn't catch that. So one track is Jay and Eddie are going to figure out. I gave them 2 log files, pointers to 2 log files. They're going to look at which images we pull, and they're going to figure out like how the blobs need to be stored, where they need to be stored, and they'll come back with some ideas for the next call. On our side, in the next 2 weeks, we already have a way to do the preset for the pre-submit and the periodic jobs. So we'll roll that out to more jobs, especially release informing, release blocking, those kinds of things. And then we will also attack kinder Kuberium and essentially throw more load at this new endpoint.
Bringing up kind also jogged my memory on it. I think a somewhat important point. I'm not sure about cryo, but I think this is the case. I know with containerd, we can also have projects like K8s switch sooner rather than later and not change the canonical location of the images, but instead configure that this is a mirror So it will try to use registry.k8s.io before it tries to use k8s.gcr.io. But if registry.k8s.io fails, it should fall through to the original, I believe. We should be able to configure it as these are the endpoints, multiple endpoints in containerd for this registry. And that is independent of Kubernetes version, and it isn't, it's a less potentially breaking change.
Yeah. Well, we don't have the people. Well, I can help out with the containerd stuff. We don't have anybody for cryo right now here on this call. So we'll have to like write up what we want them to do and see if they can do it.
Sorry, I didn't mean in those projects. I mean for like tools like K8s that are shipping a configured containerd, we can in the configuration start using registry.k8s.io as the like first
one to look at.
Yeah, and then we can, that will let us roll out in more places ahead of whatever level of confidence we need and changing it in KK.
So the way to do that, Ben, would be you filing an issue in COPS saying, "Can you please do this?"
Right.
Okay. So,
but I think we can take this approach to some projects. I know not every project is using containerd. Dockerd doesn't have this, but I think Cryo does. So at least projects using containerd and Cryo, which should be most of them going forward, we can ask them to make this change.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind here is we are already taking a lot of, we're going to take a lot of flack already for the 124 Docker shim stuff. So let's not throw in an alternative endpoint there too. Then we're just going to get hammered by people. So, okay. Was there anything else that we need was on the agenda today?
Yeah, I had one thing that was up next. Before we move on from this, though, we are going to run out of money, right? Like it is most likely going to happen. That $3 million that we have budgeted for the
Eddie, yes, don't worry about it in the sense that we'll do the best we can. Yes, we'll run out of it. We'll figure out a way out of it.
Well, we need to start figuring that out now, right? So if Tim has to go to his boss and ask for more money for GCP or
it's Priyanka is aware already, for example, and there is a deadline coming up, July, August, something, where the 3 million is going to run out. So there is already talks happening with Google, and Priyanka is aware. And I had a call with her some of us had a call with her yesterday, and like we kind of said, yes, if we need some extra money, we need to ask for it now, and it'll be a one-time thing because by the we won't have to do it again. Like we won't have to ask the same amount of money the next time.
Cool. And so, and on that note, one of the things that Arnaud mentioned, Jay, this is something you and I will have to figure out, is we're going to need a commitment from AWS for X years to provide this funding and support for this type of infrastructure we're doing.
Yeah, I'm handling that along with Ariel.
Awesome.
If you
that's part of the go ahead, Tim.
If you need some information on how the other ones work, you can ask any of us, me.
What do you mean how the other ones work?
The Google one, for example, how we are doing it with Google right now. And
no, I'm gonna I have like some follow-up questions that I actually posed to Rian. Rian actually sent me a little bit of information earlier about that, like breakdown of like costs, like is it transit, is it storage, that kind of thing. That'll be useful in my presentation to the uppers.
So Rian can probably walk you through those reports too, right, Rian?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and
I've got a meeting with Priyanka next Thursday. So.
Yeah, and Hippie is doing the cloud credits program, so he can give you the information that we have on that side too.
Yep.
Okay. All set. Eddie, did you anything else you wanted to talk about other than the AWS commitment for XCS? And Hippie, you had something. Didn't break down.
I mainly wanted to make sure that Caleb and the II team can help really directly and succinctly. And the same thing, I think, for Jay and crew. We have this beautiful document that's really helped to kickstart things into high gear. And we have the repository with the issues. And I'll just flow that right into, we had a really good rhythm early on of having this issue board that we'd review to move things forward. And we're all kind of spread thin in different areas. If there's any way that we can help to create and steward and create those issues as a group and prioritize them, maybe we can set aside some time in the meetings to be sure and limit it to a few minutes to make sure we quickly update those tickets so that we can reassign and prioritize the people getting applied, which is separate from prioritizing and making sure that the work is captured and available for people to be assigned to.
Yeah, we'll get there, Hippie, but just not yet. For the next 2 weeks, at least, we know that we have to do, on our side, we have to do 2 sets of things. One is Ben is going to log some issues and Caleb can pick them up. And then we have to go around changing the CI jobs to make sure that they point to registry.k8s.io. So if Caleb can pick up, say, kind, then me and Arno can look at something else. So pick a job in kind that's pre-submit, and then see what it will take to, pull from registry.k8s.io instead of k8s.gcr.io. Okay.
There's an open pull request with some discussion as well.
Exactly. So Arno was working on that. So Arno, did you want to say something?
About the kind stuff?
Yeah, I'm trying to assign some work to Caleb. Did you have anything specific that we could assign to Caleb?
Not at the moment, because I have a very long day. So
yeah,
I think right now, if we want to do something, is this is a conversation I have with cluster life cycle folks and SIG node folks, is do some load testing against that new endpoint and see what's happening. I think this is something that can really bring value to see how Cloudrun handle scalability for this endpoint. I think this is one thing I can think about right now.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Basically help prepare for the migration too. So if Caleb is interested, load testing against that endpoint will be great. Yeah, so pick up one class of jobs that you want to work on, Caleb, and ping us back so we don't duplicate the work. Okay. Yeah. So that's all we have time for today. Thanks a lot, everyone. And let's see you all in 2 weeks. Please leave some notes or comments or questions on Slack. Let's try to do something every day on Slack so we don't come back into the meeting to talk about things, and we'll deal with things asynchronously over the next 2 weeks. And let's not wait to report a progress or start a conversation or hey, do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? Or something like that. And we can ad hoc pull people into meetings, and we can get going. And it's already late, so that's why I'm trying to insist that we stay focused and attack this problem. Okay.
We have any work to do, file an issue. That way, also, if you're not getting to it, someone else can pick it up.
Someone else.
That sort of thing.
Okay. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.